That very well may be Marilyn Monroe's most memorable moment on screen. Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend from 1953's Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Arguably, it's up there with the subway great scene in The 7-Year Itch. Our guest today is author Carl Rollyson, who's written 2 books on Marilyn. Marilyn Monroe, A Life of the Actress, which was written some time ago but now updated and revised for 2014, and the brand new Marilyn Monroe, Day by Day. You know, Carl, in putting together a new book on Marilyn, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive library of books about Marilyn Monroe. Where do you start, sifting through it and also putting your own spin on things?
Well, you try to read certainly the most important things. I don't think I could claim, and I would be surprised if anyone could claim that they've read everything that's been written about Marilyn Monroe. But when you take a hard look at the biographies in particular, and the ones that matter, you would probably narrow it down to 6 or 7. And when I began working on Marilyn Monroe in the 1980s, you could narrow it down to really 2, possibly 3. So you start with those narratives, and then, at least what I did as a biographer, I then began to start to interview people that knew her, people that had already been thinking about her, and start to work on a pattern to see what kinds of experiences in her life seem to really coalesce. And then there's certain evidence, there's certain documents, letters she wrote, and when you get to the depth, the autopsy report, of course, and other things like that, which you can anchor a story on.
Well, I was very taken with A Life of the Actress because so many books about Marilyn Monroe deal primarily with her private life, and they never really get into her craft as an actress. And obviously what happened off the set in Marilyn's life did inform what happened on the set.
Sure.
But, she took that work seriously, and unfortunately, while Marilyn was alive, she was battling to be taken seriously. In a way, she's still not taken seriously.
Yes. I think people that don't really haven't paid attention still think of her as a fairly slight figure. In fact, when I did a biography of the poet Sylvia Plath, I saw some remarkable resemblances between her and Marilyn Monroe. They were pretty closely contemporaries. Plath was born in 1932 and Monroe in 1926, and Plath was aware of Monroe and, in fact, had a rather important dream about Marilyn Monroe. But when I started to draw these analogies in my biography of Sylvia Plath, I ran into enormous hostility from people who knew virtually nothing about Marilyn Monroe. Most of them had been attracted to Plath and knew something about Plath, but couldn't believe that there could possibly be any serious connection between the 2 women. But to me, it was quite obvious, and it was, and for me, it was because Plath herself was making that connection. So, yeah, I think you're right that there still is, I think, many people who don't take her seriously, and I'm glad to hear what you said about my book, because I wanted to create a story that was based on how she acted in films and even the way she was photographed, so that the photographs became sort of part of my narrative of her life. One of the things that disappointed me about the earlier biographies was that once they got her on screen, the biographer couldn't really tell you, is she an actress? Is she really acting? How good is she as an actress? How did she prepare for her roles? Those kinds of things really intrigued me.
I think about something you mentioned in A Life of the Actress. Certainly Marilyn Monroe was at the behest of her studio overlords for a great period of time.
Yep.
And yet when it came to how she was photographed, and let's face it, that's about half of her career.
Sure.
She's a movie actress, but her image just in photographs was almost like a separate career. And unlike the studio situation, when Marilyn was photographed, she was in complete control.
Yes, it became a Marilyn Monroe production in every sense of the word, because the photographers quickly saw that she was not going to go through some kind of mechanical posing, but that they could truly collaborate on these sessions. And I think that was really thrilling, exhilarating for her to be able to do that.
I know that Marilyn always sought to be thought of as a great actress, or at least her own definition of what a great actress should be. I'm of the opinion, and I don't know if she felt the same way, that in movies where she's playing the dumb blonde, for lack of a better term, like A Gentleman Prefer Blondes.
Right.
I don't think anyone comes close to her in that regard. People will mention Judy Holliday, for example.
Right.
But when Marilyn does it, as beautiful as she is, I mean, she's just so stunning. I mean, a complete knockout. Yes. But there's nothing threatening about her.
Nothing threatening, and the incredible, even though these are lines that she's in a sense reciting, the spontaneity, the freshness of it is quite remarkable.
And she radiates goodness.
Yes. Well, I think one of the reasons why she has lasted and why there continue to be books written about her and people attracted to her is she is a walking contradiction. That is, she's good, she seems sweet, she seems innocent, and she's sexy. Now, those things aren't supposed to go together.
Right.
She has in some of the films almost the voice of a baby, that whispery voice.
Right.
And it works so well in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes because there's this young boy in the film who has a very deep voice.
Right, yes.
Who keeps talking to her like he's the adult.
Hello. Oh, Mr. Spofford, would you please give me a hand? I'm sort of stuck.
Are you a burglar?
Heavens, no. The steward locked me in. I was waiting for a friend.
Why didn't you ring for him?
I didn't think of it. Isn't that silly?
If you were a burglar and I helped you escape...
Please help me before somebody comes along.
I'm thinking. All right, I'll help you. I'll help you for 2 reasons.
Never mind the reasons. Just help me.
The first reason is I'm too young to be sent to jail. The second reason is you've got a lot of animal magnetism.
I saw this once in an audience back in the 1980s when I first started working at Marilyn Monroe. And it was a family night at a local theater in a suburb of Detroit. And these families brought their children. And the adults and the children were equally entertained.
Right. I think of one of her great moments. It's actually my favorite moment in any Marilyn Monroe film. And it's the scene with David Wayne on the airplane in How to Marry a Millionaire.
How to Marry a Millionaire, yeah.
Because she, and you mentioned this in the book, and I was so glad. I said, I'm completely in tune with this author.
Yeah.
I mean, she hits every note right, and in a way that no one else could.
But it's different with girls, don't you think?
How is it?
Well, you know what they say about girls who wear glasses.
What are you talking about?
Men aren't attentive to girls who wear glasses.
Did you ever try it? You brought them with you, didn't you?
Yes.
Then why don't you put them on? Find out for yourself.
With you?
Why not?
Well...
Now, look, if you're worried about me, I'll tell you right now before you put them on. I already think you're quite a strudel.
Honestly?
Absolutely. I've thought so from the first minute I saw you.
Well, if you really think so...
Go ahead, put them on. You're crazy.
No.
You look better with them on.
I do?
Gives your face a certain, mystery.
No kidding.
And distinction, a certain kind of, distinction.
Well, what do you know about that?
You're already a very good-looking girl, you know, if you don't mind my saying so.
No, not at all.
And the glasses, that particular type, gives your face a very interesting, difference.
You don't think they make me look like an old maid?
I've never seen anybody in my whole life that reminded me less of an old maid.
Jack Lemmon said about her, and there were lots of problems on the set of Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
Lots of tension, but one of the things that Jack Lemmon said is, if as an actor, you're happy if you do what you set out to accomplish 80% of the time. He said the thing about Marilyn was she gave 100%. That when you saw the final product, I mean, it was all there.
Yeah.
In quite a remarkable way, and I think that's why she was under so much stress, because she couldn't let the 20% go.
Right. And I think about, what Laurence Olivier, she had issues with him in The Prince and the Showgirl. And I think he'd said later that she stole the movie.
He did admit in retrospect that for all the problems and all his sort of condescension to her at the time, in retrospect, he really had to admit that was the case.
Yeah, she outacted him.
And she was. I often say this when I give talks about her. She was incredibly strong. She lifted weights. She started doing this in the 40s before anybody lifted weights. She was jogging before anybody thought about jogging, and in sort of the way people do it today.
Right.
And there's a scene in The Prince and the Showgirl where this Olivier's playing this member of royalty who's trying to seduce her and get her on the couch and so on, and she gets up and she sweeps her arm and knocks him practically to the ground, and she does it effortlessly. I mean, there's acting there. He's taking the fall, of course, but I mean, it's just such a commanding gesture at that point.
I have a feeling that Marilyn herself may have looked down at some of those roles that she was given, and maybe she had good reason, but it seemed to me that her distaste for those roles, as wonderfully as she played them, I mean, they were magical.
I think that whatever qualms she had about and don't forget, she turned down even worse roles.
Yes.
But I think that once she committed to the project, she did everything in her power to do it professionally, even though people think of her as unprofessional because she didn't show up on time. She couldn't say her lines on cue and that kind of thing. That was a big problem for her, and people say, "Oh, she was so unprofessional." Well, in that sense, you could say, I suppose she was. But on the other hand, she so wanted to get it right. And this is again Jack Lemmon, who was quite astute and a great actor I admire, said, if it wasn't right, she would just stop.
Right.
She wouldn't fool herself into thinking, well, this is okay, this is passable. I often say to people, here's an acting challenge for you, and no one ever put it to Marilyn Monroe this way. But suppose someone said to you, you're not going to be Meryl Streep. You're not going to get a chance to do 20 different accents and play women of different nationalities and do comedy and drama and all the other things which you can do so well. Instead, what you're going to have to do is play essentially the same role over and over again, and somehow you're going to have to infuse that role with some kind of spontaneity, some sense of difference, so that even though the audience keeps coming back because they think you're repeating the role, in fact, every time you do the role, it's different.
Right.
That is an incredible... In other words, to say to an actor, you're going to have this really small range. Now, what can you do with that?
Right, yeah.
It's astonishing.
I think about her lateness to the set and the multiple takes that we've read about over the years. But then I also think about her appearance on the Jack Benny Show, which was live television.
That's right.
And she came on, and of course there are no multiple takes. It was live television. She had to be on time.
Yeah.
And she shines in that.
Same thing in Korea. 10 performances in sub-zero weather. In one case, hanging out of a helicopter to wave at the troops.
Marilyn, why did you walk away from me? Why did you want to leave me?
Because I can't trust myself with you.
What?
You're so strong and I'm so weak. And when you look at me with those big blue eyes, I
understand. Gee, Marilyn, I just can't get over just the both of us here all alone.
Yes, Jack. I never dreamed it could happen to I.
Neither did me.
I wonder if her issues on the set were a way of rebelling against the studio.
I think that's part of it. I think because she was not in control of the means of production, And after all, she left Hollywood in 1955, turning her back on her 20th Century Fox contract, asking for more creative control. I think the studio was... Hollywood was an industry. You know, she said in her last interview, there are no museums in Hollywood. You don't even value your own history. You know, You don't think of it as an art. You only think of it as a business. And I think a lot of her lateness was, well, I'm going to get it right, you know, and the rest of you be damned. Yeah. I mean, it was hard on her fellow actors, but I don't think she was thinking of them so much as she was thinking of 20th Century Fox, which was this corporation that would, you know, put her in any old thing if they thought it would make money.
And, you know, that was an astute comment for her to make regarding Hollywood's respect for its history, because, as we've seen, they still don't have a respect for the history.
No, and, you know, I mean, 2/3 of silent films are gone.
Yeah.
They've not been preserved. There are things like the American Film Institute now. Hollywood is slowly, you know, treasuring its history, but some of that is gone, you know, not to be retrieved.
Turning our attention to Marilyn Monroe day by day,
Sure.
a timeline of people, places, and events, I can't even think about what a gargantuan undertaking this must have been.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it, you know, for a long, long time. Actually, I had the idea when I first worked on Marilyn in the 1980s, but I couldn't get trade book publishers, the commercial publishers, to pay any attention to it. And finally, I found a publisher that was really enthusiastic about it, and I decided to do it as I was revising my Marilyn Monroe biography. And what I did, among other things, is I took out all the biographies I thought were reliable, and there were a good half dozen of them. And I would go page by page looking at the dates to see when they mentioned dates. And I was amazed to find that even with the biographies I respected, there were, of course, discrepancies and disagreements,
right?
Which I had to try to reconcile as best as I could. But I thought by doing this, I would get, trying to document her life day by day, I would be able to illuminate aspects of her life that you simply can't put into a biographical narrative. For example, how much time she spent at the hairdressers, or the makeup man, or really fascinating to me was, you know, at the end of her life, she had this home on Fifth Helena Drive, and it was the only home she had ever owned. She had had apartments, but never really a home like this. And how much time she spent, for instance, at Frank's Nurseries, picking out plants, was absolutely fascinating to me. In other words, it wasn't just, oh, I'm a movie star, I have a home, but no, this is going to be my creation.
Right.
You know, the care that she took with things like that, it's hard to explain in a narrative, but when you see it day after day, you know, a bill for $39.95 to Frank's Nurseries, it begins to dawn on you, you know, or you look at her food bill, what she's eating, how she's entertaining. There are all kinds of things which, if you put in such detail in a biographical narrative, people would say, well, that's kind of tedious. But here you've got a book where, if you're interested in a certain year or certain months or what she's doing on the last days of her life, you can follow it chronologically.
You know, she's a never-ending fascination as an iconic figure.
That's right.
You know, and that's not something to be dismissed. I mean, you know, she worked.
She worked, and she had a sense of what an iconic figure was. I mean, her heroes were people like Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
And when you think about Abraham Lincoln, you don't think glamour, but you do think man of the people.
Right.
And you also think of someone who's serious. There's Honest Abe, the rail splitter, but there's also the Abraham Lincoln of the Gettysburg Address. And I think all those facets are in Marilyn Monroe, too. I mean, she would often say, the people made me a star. She got to know Carl Sandburg because he wrote about Abraham Lincoln. She got interested in Arthur Miller because she saw him as a kind of Lincoln-esque figure. There's a wonderful photograph of her, Milton Green took, of her in a black Cadillac convertible with the top down. And she's standing up in the back seat, and she's holding this portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and she's absolutely beaming. Her hero.
It's always interesting when you hear a recorded interview with her and you hear her real voice.
Yeah.
And, you know, you hear her real personality.
Yeah.
And you realize just how much thought went into, for lack of a better term, the character of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, she would sometimes refer to herself
in third person. Yeah. Books like yours hopefully are going a long way to establishing the fact that she was an artist.
Yes, definitely an artist. Yeah, with an aesthetic sense. Really, interested in poetry and writing, and did some writing herself and drawing, and all facets of the arts really appealed to her.
It's just a shame that her desires remained unfulfilled in that area.
Yeah, to such an extent. In part, I think it is the times.
Right.
I think if she had lived another 10 years, I've often thought if she had been able to sort of get over that middle period in the 30s, which is often a crisis for women and sometimes men as well, the midlife crisis comes. If she had been able to get past that period, and if she had gone to Europe, made a few films in Europe, that might have made a difference too. Because where did she get her acting awards? She got awards from the Italians, for example. Europeans did understand her in a way that, in a sense, her contemporary Americans did not.
And she was a liberated woman before such a thing existed. I mean, obviously she kicked that off.
That's what Yves Montand found so appealing, is she wasn't kind of a typical American woman. He felt he could be something with her that just wasn't, except for his wife Simone Signoret. He writes about it in a biography. It's quite interesting. His appreciation of her, quite different from the other men in her life.
And I think every actor today owes her a debt of gratitude in the sense that she took on the studio, formed her own production company. I mean, these are things that are commonplace now.
That's right. She was in a transitional period when, because of TV and a number of other reasons, the movie audience was dwindling, and at the same time the studios were breaking up, and they were trying to hold on to these stars like Marilyn Monroe, and she and a number of them began to break away and form their independent production companies. If she were still alive, for example, she would be quite a wealthy woman, because of all the films she made, the only one where she really had profit sharing was Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
And that film has just made a fortune.
Again, I want to thank you so much for coming on and
you're welcome.
Chatting about, I'm obviously a fan. I think you can tell that.
Thanks for reading my book.
This conversation. I'm anxious to get the day-by-day book. A Life of the Actress was just, like I said, a breath of fresh air.
Thank you.
Instead of reading, Marilyn and the Kennedys for 400 pages.
Yes.
If someone were to, hopefully after hearing this interview, be interested in picking up any of your books, where would be the best place to, I guess Amazon, I would think.
I think Amazon is the best place. It's a wonderful online bookstore where you just have access to, so many books at such good prices, and get them delivered as quickly as possible. It is the best way. You can go looking for it in a bookstore. You may find it, you may not, but certainly online you're going to have access to it.
And just briefly here, you've written other books about Hollywood celebrities. You have a book on Dana Andrews.
Dana Andrews, a really fine movie star of the 1940s who continued acting into the 1970s. And I'm going to be coming out next year with a biography of Walter Brennan.
Oh, wow.
He was in over 200 pictures, won 3 Academy Awards, of course was a big television star with the McCoys. And there'll be some surprises in that book, because there are facets of his character, his life. I had full cooperation from his family. It's going to be quite interesting to see how people respond to him.
Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks very much.